Welcome back to this recording session. Today we're going to be developing the sound for a particular track that I'm working on at the moment, which happens to be a little bit closer to the sound of Elvis Presley with a little bit of a modern take. So the objective is to develop a bass tone that is a little bit vintagey sounding, but modern enough for it to cut through, if that makes sense to you. And for this particular purpose, we're going to be practicing a technique known as reamping, which stands for this. Let me explain to you. Reamping is a technique that allows for a guitar or bass direct signal to be recorded, for it to be processed by a proper effect chain and amplifier at a later stage, allowing for precise tone crafting. For example, when using an amp simulator software like Amplitude, you can keep tinkering with the sound of your take because what is recorded is the clean DI and not the output of the guitar modeler software. I'll be doing the same but with analog gear, by outputting the previously recorded DI into my amp and pedals through the use of a reamp box, which turns the output of my interface into the right signal for my amps. But if you're working in the box, don't worry because all of these techniques applies the same. You can also get the same tones from this session, since I made captures of them, which you can download for free from ToneNet and use with the free ToneX app. Link in the description. Now with that out of the way, it's time to get to it. But before we do that, let me tell you that what you're about to see is the entirety of the recording process, so there will be no editing whatsoever, because the idea is for you to see the entirety of the process and learn from my own mistakes, which I will commit along the way. So, with that being said, let's do it! Welcome to Luna by Universal Audio. Today I decided to work in this particular software, and I gotta tell you, I'm quite impressed. It's the first time that I am producing a track from the start to finish on Luna, and being very pleased with what I saw and how well it has behaved. So let's begin by implementing the routing for our reamping session. Over here we got the stars of the show. These are the DI tracks that were recorded previously directly into the recording software, the recording device, and the track in question sound like this. Of course, as it is right now, sounds quite boring. There is nothing going on for the guitars and the bass, and that's the whole purpose of today's recording session. So let's begin. The first thing to do when reamping, always make sure that you got the output of the DI track all the way to the top, because it's better to have the fully fleshed out tone rather than having something that is not properly presented, right? Now, the second thing, let's make sure that we're outputting correctly. On my system, the output that I'm using for reamping purposes is output 11. By doing so, the entirety of the apparatus that you got here is gonna be already hooked up, as it is, allegedly. And let me give you a little bit of a rundown on what we're gonna be doing. Tonight, we're gonna be splitting the signal thanks to the use of the split box by JHS. I love those guys. I actually have several of those devices around the studio because they're very useful. And I'm outputting from the interface going into the split box. Why? Because I am splitting the signal into two sections. One is going into this compressor. This is a custom-made compressor that I love. It's amazing sounding. And it's going straight into the Fender over there, the basement. And the other output is going directly into my channel 4 on my Universal Audio. What's the name of this guy? 4710D. A fantastic preamp / compressor that we'll be using for recording the DI. Why am I doing it this way? Because I want to get that vintage sound. Okay? And this kind of circuitry is very, very similar to what would have been done in probably the late 60s. I hope, or I think. So let's begin from there. Now we got the DI, we're gonna go back to Luna, and in Luna we made sure that the output is correctly set, is properly set when it comes to the volume, and look at that, I already got my DI track already set, and you can see here that the output is correctly set to, the input is set to the converter I'm gonna be using for my DI. In this case, I will use my Convert AD Plus over here on the rack, and it's already expecting signal, that's good. So let's begin. I'm going to turn on the input monitoring, and yes, we're getting signal. That's a good sign. So let's press play, and allegedly everything should work correctly. Yes, it is, but this is super distorted. Why is that? Well, just look at the parameters of the preamp. Let's work with them. First and foremost, let's work with our gain stage. So I'm gonna set the metering to drive, which stands for the input, and I'm gonna drop the output of the channel all the way down. Let's see. Okay, it's starting to sound quite cool. I like it. One thing, this preamp actually has a particularity. You can actually blend between the valve inside of the preamp or the transformer, so the transistor. So let's see how it sounds like. The difference between both of them is very, very important, and you're gonna hear it. When you use the valve, you're gonna get a much rounder, less transient-driven sounding bass. And if we push it to the transistor, we're gonna get a much more pronounced attack. Right now, we got it very close to the tube. Let's see. I'm gonna push it all the way down. I prefer the valve, so I'm gonna stick to that one. Now I'm gonna push a little bit the output, but we gotta be sure that we don't clip. Very good. Starting to sound like a record already. Now let's do a final trick with the preamp. I'm gonna turn on the compressor. Right now I have it off. Let's see how it reacts if I set it to fast. Let's see. And I'm gonna get the gain reduction on the meter. Here we go. I think I like it better with the slow attack on the compression, because since the bass tone for this track is kinda very rhythmical, it's very percussive. If I have it set to fast, we'll lose a little bit of that attack on the bass, but we gain a little bit of extra compression. Well, a little bit of more control on the whole sound. But being frank, I prefer the slow attack. Also, one thing when it comes to this, when it comes to recording and applying this kind of effects such as compression or EQ, we gotta do it in a very mild way. Right now, I feel that we're starting to get to the territory in which it could be too much. So let's see. Okay, I think this is already the winner. I'm going to stick to this one. Now let's move over to the bass. And I will cut this very point because I'm going to move cameras and stuff. But stick around. Okay, I already changed the camera and the light and everything should be working correctly. And one thing that I forgot to mention is that the previous technique, the one that implies the DI, can be replicated by using plugins if you're in the box. The plugin that I would recommend to get is the Sentry Channel Strip by Universal Audio. That guy has a particularly beautiful tone to it and also comes with a very practical EQ and very useful compressor. Okay, now that we got the amplifier set over here, let's take a look at the software. First and foremost, let's make sure that we got the amp in question visible, the track that we're going to be using to record it. I have it already set. I created before going live or recording, and the input is already set to input number 8, which is already the one in my converter. This time around, I'm going to be using a very flat sounding preamp, which is the one that is built in my Discrete 8. That's because I will be using a very colorful sounding amp already, so I wanted to get a pristine tone. And also, I'm going to insert a plugin here, and I'm going to go for the sound. This guy is Softube. Here is Celestion speaker. Celestion speaker shaper. Perfect. This guy is fantastic. It's probably my favorite plugin when it comes to IRs. This is basically an IR loader, but it allows you to do all sorts of modifications because it has plenty of IRs, and you can switch to different speakers. You can switch to different speaker cabinet sizes and stuff. In this case, I'm gonna go for a 3x10 because that would be the one that makes sense for this particular tone. There is 10 inches, and I'm gonna go for the bass, maybe this guy, and let's see how it fares. This means that we're going to be recording the output of the amp with no cabinet involvement. Everything's going to be done here in the box. So we're going to be tracking the output of the amplifier. So we're going to be shaping the tone based on this sound. So here we go. I'm going to lower the volume of everything here so we can actually start from scratch. Here we go. And I'm going to mute the DI. So we can concentrate on the sound of the amplifier. Number 2, you should turn on the amp. It's already on, but it's on bypass. Stand by. Now there's fire in the hole. Let's see. Already sounding quite warm, don't you think? Starting to get a little bit of that crispiness and that kind of fuzzy sound. It's not fuzzy, but you know what I mean. A little bit of that colorful tone. For this purpose, I am working with the vintage channel, which is, as the name implies, very, very vintage sounding, and you already hear it. I'm gonna pull the bright switch, so we might get a little bit more of extra definition to the tone. We'll see. Good. At this stage, I'm going to be turning on the compressor and it should hit the amp a little bit harder. And you see that I push the input, the volume, a little bit high, but it's not that terribly high, so I don't think we're going to get some form of clipping. Let's see. Look, I think this is the moment in which it's very important for us to play around with the microphone here. Right now we're working with a Dynamic 57, which is probably an SM57. But I wanna get a little bit of a darker tone. There is a little bit of a mid range thing that is kind of annoying, and we'll be working on it. So first, let's try a different microphone. Maybe a Ribbon 121, probably a Royer. Let's see. Excellent. I simply went over here to the equalizer and I decided to apply a little bit of a tiny cut. As you can see, it's minus 2.6 dBs on this particular frequency, 230, not surprising at all. That's usually where some of the mod appears. Now, I'm gonna add a little bit of room sound to it because the idea of is having the room and the DI together, so we can have an extra layer of oomph, if that makes sense to you. So let's say I'm gonna push the dry a little bit more, and also is to add a little bit of more of that vintage warm tone, but also a little bit of more realism. Let's see. Now let's see the sound of the wet or of the room microphones, because I think we could lower or change a little bit the parameters. I'm gonna go full on wet, and we're gonna be working with the far microphone first, just to see how it sounds. Okay, that sounds kind of realistic to my ears. So let's see how it fares within the mix. Good, it's working, but here comes the big one. We're gonna be blending in the DI and the bass amp together. For the longest of times, or for the entirety of this exercise, we have been only listening to the bass amp. So here we go. I'm gonna talk them down, all the way down, and we're gonna bring them in together at the same time. Nailed. So from here onwards, the only thing left is, well, to record. But one more thing. It's very important when you are doing this kind of dual recording, dual bass recording thing, to make sure that the polarity of both signals are correct. Let me show you. Right now, I'm gonna switch, or I'm gonna switch the polarity on the DI. Okay. So the DI, remember, it has is going through the universal audio, and there is an actual polarity flip switch on it. So right now they are seems that they are phase coherent. So I'm gonna press play, and then I'm gonna flip the switch. And if everything is correct, the bass is gonna go almost unaudible. Excellent. So we got perfect coherency between the two takes. They are sounding amazing, and they're ready to be recorded. So from here onwards, I'm just gonna simply press record, and that would be it.